going to go over neurocomplexity and the definition itself and the why behind the definition. This is an introduction to some future posts that I'm going to do about how to integrate neurocomplexity into your neurodivergent journey as a alternative framework to the neurodivergent labels. And again, this isn't instead of labels. Labels are part of neurocomplexity, so labels as in ADHD, autism, giftedness, I call them constellations in the neurocomplexity sky. These labels allude to your flavor of neurocomplexity, but we'll talk about neurocomplexity here as kind of what it is and why. And then, like I said, in future posts, we'll talk about the way we can integrate this into your lived experience and how it can be helpful. So the definition of neurocomplexity I came up with in 2023, and it's the gestalt interplay of neurodivergent wiring that includes increased complexity in the areas of cognition, sensory receptivity, cellular response, attention, creativity, and intuition. So what this means in a nutshell is that I believe that each of the labels that we use for neurodivergent, so giftedness, ADHD, autism, dyslexia, learning differences, are actually all comprised of these elements in different combinations. So cognition, how we think, and our thinking processes, sensory receptivity, so how our senses take in information from the world and process that information. A lot of neurodivergent individuals have differences in sensory and cognition. Cellular response, that's alluding to the difference that research is showing in our cellular response to stress, to foreign invaders in our body. A lot of neurodivergent people also have issues, physical ailments that come with their divergence. So this this is connected to our differences in cellular response. Attention is how we focus our consciousness onto something at any given time. So attention is a huge difference in a lot of areas of neurodivergence. Creativity is our ability to see things and connect things in new and different ways. This feels like it's inherently part of most neurodivergent diagnoses and kind of those like, hey, what's so great about your neurodivergence? Creativity. But it feels like it's interwoven into all types of neurodivergence. And then last but not least, intuition. Intuition isn't something that's talked about a lot according to neurodivergence, but I see it as a combination of cellular response and also this ability to make sense or have a knowing about something that we don't have hard data to prove, but we know it's true. So intuition is an important piece for me to weave into this because I do feel like it's left out quite a bit when we're talking about neurodivergence, but it tends to be a big part of people's lived experience if it's a factor for them. So when I think of neurocomplexity flavor for each individual, I think of each of these components, each of these elements as a star in the sky. And for each of us, we have different combinations or constellations of these stars that represent our areas of neurodivergence. And altogether, gestalt, that is our neurocomplexity flavor. So if you have been diagnosed with ADHD and are self-diagnosed with autism, for example, you might create one constellation for your ADHD. It might include differences in cognition, that star. It might include sensory differences, that star. It might include attention differences, and maybe it includes creativity. Your autistic constellation may include those same stars and may also include intuition. So then we look at those together, superimposed, and that is your neurocomplexity flavor. So if you can envision that, great. If you can't, maybe spend some time creating a star for each of these areas of elements of neurocomplexity and see if you can try to represent your different areas of neurodivergence using those stars. Now you can take it a step further and you can talk about kind of the differences between the sizes of the stars, how close the stars are to you, away from you. You can have fun with this metaphor. It's just a different way of seeing the same thing. So it's not saying that autism doesn't exist, it's not saying ADHD doesn't exist, but it's saying that these are actually comprised of these elements. These labels are comprised of these elements, and these elements are what's actually important, not the label itself, for knowing how to move forward in our lived experience. So some of the reasons why I came up with this new term, because it's like, yeah, there's lots of terms out there, Lindsay, like we don't necessarily need new ones, but the reason why is there are a few important reasons that led me to actually take the step to come up with a new word, especially because I didn't want to add more confusion to an already kind of confusing area for a lot of people of neurodivergence. But this term felt really important for me to be able to function as a provider because it helped me to work with my clients in a way that felt aligned. Why? Because, for one thing, this term is neutral. There's neutrality to the term neurocomplexity. And let's just break down neurocomplexity first. Neuro, of the nervous system, complexity, consisting of many different and connected parts. So it's a complexity. We're all neurocomplex in our own ways. Some of us are more neurocomplex, but it's our neurocomplexity levels and flavor that create differences between, others in the world. But a lot of my clients, coming back to the reason why, a lot of my clients that I worked with had a lot of connotations about labels. So if someone is diagnosed with autism later in life, they may already have a connotation of what autism is, because words are symbols and symbols communicate ideas. And these ideas are bigger than the label themselves, but they are a feeling, they are a sense, they are an understanding. And so these words become symbols. So autism becomes a symbol, giftedness becomes a symbol that represents something, and we tend to have a felt sense about that thing. For some people, that's fine. They can work with that and they can, integrate that into their being. For others, it creates a barrier to integrating. And so, not to create more ableism, but to create another framework in how to understand one's differences felt important from a neutral standpoint, kind of a neutral door to enter into to understand how one has been divergent their whole life. So it was a neutral term. Even giftedness tends to be sort of like, I don't really want to talk about that. I don't want to refer to myself as gifted because that may make me seem a certain way, and I don't like that. So neutrality. Also, I was noticing a lot of overlap. The more I learned about ADHD, the more I learned about autism, the more I learned about giftedness, the more I realized that I didn't see the clarity in where one started and where one left off. And that's because they're all comprised of these similar elements. And so as I was trying to figure this out, I realized we don't really need to get lost in the sauce there. What if we just broke it down into the things that were important, the things that were actually different about us, not the words themselves? So it kind of creates this normalization of this overlap of these different types of neurodivergence, and it also keeps us from getting too consciously caught up in the what's what and more focused on the how do we move forward. Interplay versus additive. So neurocomplexity embraces the interplay of these different elements. It embraces how they work together, how they may get in each other's way, versus, I have autism and I have ADHD. That feels more additive. I have this plus this. Neurocomplexity is more like I have this times this. I have traits of sensory receptivity times traits of cognition and how those work together. It also takes into consideration the body. So a lot of like twice exceptionality, those terms that talk about multiple neurodivergences, still don't make space to talk about how these impact our bodies. So the cellular response is a really important part of neurocomplexity, to also take into consideration all the different cellular differences that we have that aren't just affecting our mind, but our body-mind. Also, the last reason why this title felt appropriate, neurocomplexity, is that we are more complex. There's research to support that there's more synapses on neurodivergent neurons, in the sense that there's less pruning that goes on in late childhood. So we don't lose a lot of our synapses, we keep them. So it makes our lived experience more complex, which is neither good nor bad, but it's different. And it also, complexity is already part of the understanding of giftedness. There's more complexity to how one understands and speaks. So complexity felt like a logical kind of part of this definition that helps to understand these types of neurodivergence and how they work together. Okay, so I'm going to speak more about, in future videos, about different traits or different identifications that fit within neurocomplexity. So different labels that fit in neurocomplexity. So it's mainly autism, ADHD, giftedness, but we also see learning differences, synesthesia, gender fluidity, certain types of chronic illness. So a lot of other kind of constellations that fit within this neurocomplex night sky that I want to talk about. And then also I'd love to talk in the future about how to integrate this into your therapy work, your self-exploration, and why this can be helpful. So I'd love to hear your questions. See if you can create your neurocomplexity constellation. There is no right way or wrong way to do it. So see if you can, play around with that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on neurocomplexity as a framework. Thanks so much for listening. If you've made it thus far, nice work. I'll talk to you soon.